It's the Hero Show. Welcome to the Hero Show, everybody. Starring the irrepressible Andrew Bernstein and the resurgent Robert Begley. I am Andrew Bernstein, and you are indubitably Robert Begley. How you doing today, Robert?
I'm doing fabulous, Andy. Ready to take a trip down memory lane because today's hero, who we're going to cover, has inspired me since I'm like 5 years old.
Well, this the same is true, on this end. I, I've always been a superhero fan, and my favorite superhero was just happens to be the Amazing Spider-Man. And so, when I was there he is, Peter Parker himself, right? With
Yep.
yeah, with great power comes great responsibility. But iconic line from the early Spider-Man comics. But you know, so when I was a kid, I was before Marvel comes on the scene, early 1960s. So I was reading, Batman and Superman, and I always liked the Batman character, but when Marvel, there were always things, even when I was like 9, 10 years old, that didn't sit right with me. Like Robert,
Mhm.
uh, Clark Kent puts on a pair of glasses and nobody recognizes that he's the same guy as
Yeah.
as Superman. I thought-
Mhm.
and Lois Lane, this brilliant investigative reporter who's in love with, she can't tell the difference. Have you
Mhm.
ever seen Clark Kent or Superman in the same room at the same time? It was just kind of lame. You know,
Yeah.
but Marvel comes on the scene, and this is a controversy amongst superhero aficionados because I like the fact that Peter Parker, the kid, the kid who becomes Spider-Man, has personal issues at home that he's got to deal with because the characters are more
Yeah.
fleshed out. To me, they're more three-dimensional. Other superhero fans
Mhm.
didn't like it because they said it was too naturalistic. These guys all have problems. These problems will never end.
Mhm.
They're never resolved. I prefer. So other people said I prefer DC, where these guys don't have personal problems. But I like the more fully developed characters, that
Yeah.
Marvel presented. They had love lives, they had family issues, and I understand the objection that these personal problems never get resolved. I get that, but the thing I love about it is when it's time to do the heroic, daring do and save the world from the supervillains, they rise to the occasion, whatever their personal
Mhm.
issues are at home. And that's certainly true of Spider-Man, Steve Ditko's most iconic creation.
Yeah. Yeah, Andy. So we never had that discussion because for me, growing up in my family with four boys in one room until I was like 10, and there was one neat pile of comics in the corner my oldest brother Damien had, and he loved Captain America. Another brother loved Iron Man. Third one loved the Hulk, and one of my sisters loved Thor. But when I saw Spider Man, it just gripped me from the beginning because I
Yeah, me
saw
too.
an
Yeah,
individualist. He was the cops didn't like him, the criminals didn't like him, the newspapers didn't like him, but all he did was save the good guys from the bad guys. He swung from my own New York City skyscrapers one to another. So it just got me like from the beginning. I was all in. I didn't know as much about the backstory, like the personal problems and all this stuff. I just saw this one guy against everyone else, and for me as one of nine, I kind of felt like, yeah, everyone's older than me. Everyone's got their own opinions, and I want to be like Spider Man. That was kind of my introduction as a child to this hero, and then the cartoon that was on Saturday mornings, and then this is a first way. If I talk about evolution of heroes, so I go from 5, maybe 10 years old. Then I go to Greek mythology heroes, which I think the American comics are the equivalent, the updated version of the Greek mythology, especially where um, the Greek heroes have this tragic flaw. And similarly, Marvel superheroes have this tragic flaw. And we'll talk about this especially with Steve Ditko, how initially he he helped that to develop his characters when he was with Marvel, and then eventually he went out on his own, consciously, philosophically. So
right.
that's just a preamble. Let's.
Yeah,
You have
yeah.
anything to follow up on that? Then we can.
Steve Ditko lived a long, productive life, 1927
Yes.
to 2018.
Oof.
Right? He died
Yeah.
just 2 years ago, age almost 91.
90. Yeah.
1920s,
Hmm.
yeah, he was 90 years old, right? It would have been 91 later that year. And 1927 was a good year. That's the year the Babe, took, set a record in baseball at 60 home runs. That we talk
Charles
about iconic.
Lindy.
Oh yeah,
Yep.
Charles Lindbergh. That's a
Lindbergh.
secondary thing,
Carson.
but the Babe Ruth, of course.
Yeah.
No, just
Of course.
no, yeah. But so yes, Charles Lindbergh soloed the Atlantic in 1927. That is correct.
Yeah.
But anyhow, that's the year Steve Ditko was born. Was in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Is that somewhere in
That's
Pennsylvania? Is
right.
where it's from.
That's right. Yep. Hmm. Johnstown. Yeah. And
All right.
one of four boys, average family, but was drawn to comics at a young age, particularly Batman, Jerry Robinson, and he would illustrate. That was what he did. That was, what he enjoyed doing in high school. And then right after high school, he joined the military and went over to Germany and continued drawing. That was kind of one of the things he did over there. Then comes back to the United States, and in the early 50s decides to go to New York City and study in the school, which would become the School of Visual Arts. And he studied under Robinson. That was his mentor. And Robinson saw talent. He saw the talent in Ditko, in how how detailed, especially his fingers. That's what, if you look at like the hallmarks of Ditko, the fingers and the facial anguish are things, it's Ditko like right away. We don't have these exactly right here, but just this was kind of his motif in comics. And then early on, he goes from working on his own professionally, and then he joins up with Stan Lee, which it was called Atlas Comics at the time, and then eventually was renamed to Marvel.
Atlas.
So within a short
Atlas.
period of time,
Atlas.
yeah,
That's quite a coincidence.
that's right,
you
that's
know,
right. And there were several books on him. I'll tell you one of the best ones. Ditko Unleashed has like it's a thick book. It's got
oh yeah,
all of his work, all of his illustrations, complete biography. We're not going to go into so much, fine detail, but talking about the man himself, ideas were important to him from the beginning. And it was in the 50s, I believe it was 1950s, that he discovered Ayn Rand. He discovered the novels of Ayn Rand, Fountainhead, Atlas Shrugged, and that had a major impact on him as an illustrator, artist, and storyteller.
right. No, absolutely. I just wanted to add a couple of things. His father had an
Mm-hmm.
interest, evidently, in these newspaper comic strips, especially Prince Valiant,
That's right.
who was, who
Yeah.
was a hero.
Mm-hmm.
So, that might have been young Steve's first introduction to comic strip superheroes, or
Mm-hmm.
or
That's right. Yes.
very, very, very powerful heroes. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and so Steve studies. Young Steve, like you said, school becomes School of Visual Arts. Don Robinson he was the guy who created Batman? Is or
Yeah.
was
Jerry Robinson. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Was it Jerry Robinson? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Said
Mm-hmm.
that you pointed out that Ditko studied with him at the school that became the School of Visual Arts, and Robinson said he knew right away what a hard worker Steve Ditko was. That
That's right.
that he'd be at it for
Mm-hmm.
hours, every night. So okay, so he goes to work for the in late 1950s, right? For Atlas Comics, which becomes Marvel. We say a few things about some of the guys at what becomes Marvel, who also to me are
Yeah.
heroes. Stan Lee, whatever disagreements he and Ditko had later, Stan Lee was the creative inspiration behind Marvel for like 20
They
years
needed each
before.
other. They were
Yeah,
Lennon and McCartney in many ways. They needed each other, and it's
the nice
even the
analogy.
timeline
Yeah,
kind of simulates the
yeah,
timeline even simulates that in effect.
right.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
Stan Lee
Stan Lee,
also.
Jack Kirby.
Yeah. Stanley also was like a comic. Regard him as a comic book genius, and the inspiration and the guiding talent behind Marvel Comics' rise, and who also lived a
Yes.
long life, lived to be like 95, and lived to see
Yeah.
his comic book company become an empire, and all
Yes.
of these very super
Yes.
popular movies. But also, you mentioned
Hmm.
Jack Kirby. Now, I gotta say, Jack Kirby drew Captain America, right? And yeah,
Yes. Yes.
and I
Yeah.
love Captain America. Who doesn't love Captain America? If you don't love Captain America, you're
You
feeding
have to.
Tommy. You have to love Captain America. Yeah, 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 you know. But what I loved about Jack Kirby's style was he was like incapable of drawing anything less than physical specimens. I mean, his men just rippled with muscle. The women were all spectacularly beautiful. I mean, I
Yes.
love Jack Kirby's
Yeah.
style, but but
Yeah.
that's not the topic for tonight. Just want to put that put that in there.
Well,
But
we'll show you something. So,
Steve Ditko had a
yeah.
very different
So
style. Right?
he had a different style, and we'll bring that up. So initially, there was kind of a down period, late 40s, early 50s, with the heroes, with the Batmans and the Supermans, and it was more of this gory stuff and monsters and mystery, and that was how Ditko kind of paid his dues. But then we get to the 60s, and there's a new generation. Younger people want younger. They just want it's a new audience that's looking for these comic books. And Dylan, if you could bring up the Spider-Man with the Kirby and the evolution. So Stanley gets this idea for a Spider-Man, and he goes to Jack Kirby, who also had the idea of Silver Spider. Kirby had prior, and Lee's like, why don't you take a crack at this? Because Kirby was more advanced, actually, at the time. He was more advanced than Ditko was, and Stan Lee didn't like what Kirby came up with. So then, basically, he goes to Steve Ditko, and if you see here on the left, that's Captain America, that's Jack Kirby, and then in the middle is Kirby's first Spider-Man. And if
Yeah,
you notice, okay,
yeah, he looks more like a NFL linebacker. This is the kind of male
yeah,
characters Kirby drew. Where Spider
yeah,
Man's like a 16, 17-year-old kid, which was another reason I
he's
liked him when I was young, and a lot of
yes,
people did. He was a teenager, and he had
that's
the
right,
kind of
that's
issues and
right, yeah.
problems that teenagers often dealt with. But yeah, Spider Man is more lean. He's not the
He's
bulked
lean,
up
he's
muscle man.
agile,
Yeah,
he's fluid, but even just the outfit before, the ones to the left, they have like the outer underwear basically. So this was revolutionary. That Spider-Man does not have that. It's more like a ballet dancer outfit, and then his face is completely covered. That was also radical because always, if you think of Batman, Superman, it was their faces were partially Captain America partially covered, but not completely covered. So, like you said, Andy, Peter Parker, nobody would know this guy was a teenager, high school kid. Once he put this mask on. So here we have a whole different look at how a superhero dresses. And when Lee saw that, he's like, "Nope, that's my guy. That's where
yeah.
where we are going with
Yeah,
it."
and the boots are a very different style
Yes.
also. Right?
The boots as well, yeah,
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 and all the other, yeah. If you think before Spider-Man, they all had boots. They had this outer underwear. They had partial face. Like that was the model for the superhero. Spider-Man comes in, Ditko comes in, and it's like completely different. The idea of having the web come from his wrist. Also, Kirby, his idea was shooting a gun with webs in it. So this was a big difference between the two. Uh, Ditko did not know it would last. He just drew a couple of them, but over the evolution, it caught on immediately. For several of the reasons that we've already mentioned, Andy, that he's younger, people relate to that. He's got problems. He's not unapproachable. Okay, I mean, we like our heroes to be idealized, but also we want to relate to them in some sense. So if we see their problems and the possibility of overcoming those problems, then that makes them more appealing to
yeah.
us. And yeah, go
You
ahead.
know, as human beings, we have the capacity of abstraction, of selective attention, and so
Yes.
there are different kinds of heroes. but my all-time favorite hero, of course, is Howard Rourke in The Fountainhead. He has no
We'll
flaws.
talk about him. We will talk
Yeah,
about him. Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
he has no flaws, and and I love Howard Rourke. Now, the most. Now, but another hero, another fiction hero like Peter Parker, in spite, he has all these problems that he has to deal with. He's a kid, you got teenage angst, as they call it. He's got
Hmm.
romantic, he's shy because he was a nerd, before. And I shouldn't use that term. He
Yeah.
was super smart. He was super smart, physically undeveloped,
Academically.
socially,
Hmm.
yeah, he was
Yeah.
academically very well developed, physically underdeveloped, socially, he was shy and awkward. And so I can see he's shy with the girls that he likes. He's got serious problems at home. Aunt May is, his uncle is murdered by bad guys. Aunt May is sick, and he doesn't
Hmm.
have money. He's got all these problems to deal with. Uh, I always abstracted away from that. He's a kid. He's
Hmm.
got all these problems. Okay, fine. They never get resolved. I get the objection here, but he's a hero. He rises above that literally when he's swinging across the skyscrapers, and he
Yes.
takes on the bad guys
Yes.
with great courage and skill, and wisecracking while he's doing it. Spider-Man was a
Leaving
great
notes,
wisecracker.
friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Yep. Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm. Yeah. If we
yeah.
look at
You know,
early on, I think
so anyway,
I think
I
it's
was
the
at this.
first
I could
issue.
just selective attention.
Yeah.
I can abstract away from the problems, which that the unresolved problems, and just focus on the heroism. And that part of it's inspiring because it shows us, yeah, somebody can have all kinds of issues in their personal lives, that may be intractable or seemingly intractable, but still be a
Hmm.
hero, still be a towering hero, and that's inspiring. And I like that idea a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely, Andy. So, in one of the early issues, um, there's a criminal running past Peter Parker, and the cops are telling him to stop that guy. And Parker doesn't know the guy's running fast. He lets him go, and the cops like, "Why didn't you do it?" And he's like, "Really, it's your job to stop criminals. It's not mine." Later on, he finds out that same criminal is the one that killed his uncle Ben, and this is where Parker makes this evolution. Now I need to look at life differently here. I need to save the bad guys. If the cops are not doing this well enough, and I have this power, then as they say, with great power comes great responsibility, and that's what Spider-Man represents. He makes that change, and he goes uh, for that purpose. So the comic takes off. It is incredibly popular. We go to the apex of possibly all of cartoon history, comic history, is I think it's serial 33, 34, 35. Dylan, if you could show that one, that's
That's
when
when
he
he's way
was
down.
under.
That's when he's got
Yes,
all that
yes,
debris on
yeah,
his back, and he pushes up.
that's right.
Yeah,
Here,
yeah, I remember that. I remember
here we
reading that
go.
as a kid. Yeah,
So it's like 4 pages. The prior, if you turn the page, and here's just following a storyline. The prior page has like 8 different graphics. Then it comes down to 4, and he's struggling. He's struggling. There's some kind of serum that he wants that his aunt needs, and he can't reach it, and he's blaming himself. Oh, I could have done this, and I can't. So he summons up all of his energy, and then the full 1 page you can experience it, Andy. You're turning the page, you're following, you're a teenager, then all of a sudden, boom. And this is the Atlas pose, right? This is Atlas carrying the world, lifting the
right.
world over his shoulders. I did it. And that was the climax of the character of Spider-Man as far as Ditko was concerned.
Just
Um,
let just let me
it,
interject. Just let me interject here for a
yes, go ahead.
second. Regarding Ditko's artwork, love the costume. Right, it's beautiful.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
blue and the red with the webbings, and in the red.
Hmm.
Um, It's just absolutely eye-catching, and the lean muscularity of the
Yeah.
Spider-Man hero, not not the NFL linebacker, but he's like a
Bulky.
two,
No.
Yeah, he's not all jacked up. He's lean and muscular. Maybe he's 100. Maybe what was it? He's maybe 6 foot, 180 pounds. Maybe he's not six
Yeah,
five,
if
two
that.
fifty. You know,
No,
you know.
no.
Yeah. So he's
Hmm.
more of an everyman. He's more of your everyman. You know, every teenager type of superhero. And this is so heroic. The artwork is just stunning. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
this is really eye catching.
And so by this time, the two were going in different directions. They had stopped talking, Ditko and Lee. They had actually stopped talking to each other, and Lee would just have like a possible series title for what the next comic strip would be, and then Ditko would do almost all the remaining work, and he didn't get credit. Initially, he did not get any credit for this. They have this superhero that, yeah, thank you. He writes about this next slide here is who gets credit for the actual creation. And Lee said basically, "Oh, I have this idea about Spider-Man," and he has a 1 or 2 page synopsis. So does that mean you created it? Did go on to the right. He says, "I'm the one that came up with the costume, with the idea of the web, with story synopses, and um, basically, so now it's a combination. It's both of us are creating this thing. To merely have an idea of something is not enough until it's put literally down on paper into some kind of material form. Anyone can have any idea about anything. You want to talk to that, Andy, as a just as
Yeah.
kind of a philosophic idea. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, we're not Platonists, we're Aristotelians, right? We
That's
don't
right.
live the li-
Yes.
we don't we don't live the life of a disembodied mind or spirit. We're partially physical beings. We occupy a physical world, and we have to survive and flourish in a physical world. And genius needs to be applied. And nobody shows this more brilliantly than Ayn Rand in Atlas Shrugged with the character of Robert Stadler, who's a brilliant
Right.
theoretical scientist, but he has no interest in applying those ideas to reality. And I think we mentioned this on an
Mm-hmm.
earlier hero show, Rob, but we contrasted it with scientists like Joseph Priestley and Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin, also a great scientist, in the
Practicality.
18th century.
Yes.
Yeah, and he was the one, who did a lot of work on electricity, linked it to lightning, and he
Yes.
was chagrined until he could find some practical application for his theoretical work on lightning as a form of electricity. He was upset, and when he invented the lightning rod and actually saved many people's houses and barns from burning, due to lightning strikes.
Thousands of
He had
lives.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
he had applied his theoretical understanding to practical reality with a life benefiting invention. And so, the
Mm-hmm.
ideas have to be applied in practice. And you're right, it's a
Yeah.
good example. Stanley came up with the idea, and Steve Ditko took it and ran with it and created most of the creation of Spider-Man is his work.
Yeah. Yeah. So we can move on because not long after Spider-Man, more of a solo creation was Doctor Strange, who is now, talk about the movies and
Hold
how,
on a second, Robert. Hold on a second. Let me say
yeah.
something about Spider-Man before we go to Doctor Strange.
Mm-hmm.
Another great character. But
Yeah.
one of the nice touches in the early Spider-Man is so Puny Parker. He's still Flash Thompson, the football hero, calls him Puny Parker because he's supposed to be just this real science nerd. He can't show he could bend Flash Thompson like a pretzel by this time. He's got the proportionate strength of a spider, but he
Yeah.
can't show it. And
Right.
so Flash Thompson's this obnoxious bully, towards Peter Parker. But the nice twist on the Flash Thompson character is he loves Spider-Man. Like you said,
Yeah. Right. Right.
everybody
Right.
everybody's against J. Jonah Jameson, another great character, the skin flint Scrooge like bellowy,
Yes.
nasty publisher editor of the Daily Bugle, great name for a newspaper, by the way,
Right.
is constantly harping. He's carping against Spider-Man in the newspaper constantly, and riling up the public against Spider-Man. But Flash Thompson, He's true. He said, "No, Spider-Man's not a criminal. Spider-Man's not a bad guy. Spider-Man's a hero." So, there's Peter Parker. At times, might want to bend him like a pretzel because the girls all
Yeah,
like him, and Peter's shy with the girls. He's obnoxious towards Peter, calls him puny Parker and everything. But you see, he's such a big Spider-Man champion. I might want to take him in a
yeah,
dark alley when nobody's around and teach him a lesson. But he's such a big Spider-Man champion. It's a nice touch. It's a nice twist in the Spider-Man
yeah.
arc.
It is, and Andy, thank you because you actually reminded me the villains. All of Spider-Man's villains, and those were Ditko creations. He's the one that
Yeah,
came up,
Doc Ock.
Doctor Octopus,
Doc
and yeah, and the Green Goblin, and all these. They were, and the villains. As in, it's funny if you look at like literature and movies, the villains are generally more appealing because they're more focused on their. They have kind of a more direct motive, oftentimes, and they're more fleshed out. Because as Ayn Rand said, it's hard to flesh out a hero who doesn't have any kind of major flaws. And so, yeah, his villains are
Yeah, I think
iconic as well, and we see them
yeah,
in every single movie.
that's a good point. There's a couple of good points there. First of all, Doctor Octopus and Green Goblin, they are so colorful. They're so original.
Yes,
This
yes,
the
yeah,
Green Goblin with that Halloween costume flying around on his little bat glide. It was hilarious. Throwing pumpkin, shaped bombs. Yeah, it was so original, and a lot of other, Steve Ditko's villains in Spider-Man. Sandman,
yeah.
Electro,
Hmm. Hmm.
Vulture. Remember Craven the Hunter, the great hunter, big game. He was hunting Spider-Man through Central Park. There was a lot of this is a lot of stuff I loved.
Amazing.
A
Yeah,
lot.
yeah,
I ate this stuff up, when I was a
yeah,
kid. But the more serious point you raise, it's a good point, and I think Ayn Rand discusses this. You know, uh, if altruism is a dominant morality, and we're supposed to be meek and humble and self-sacrificing, it's hard to have a dynamic hero because heroes have to stand up and be assertive so. But villains, they're allowed to be egoistic. They pursue
yeah,
whatever goals they pursue whatever
yeah.
goals they're after without any compunctions. And so the villains
Hmm.
are often more assertive, more powerful, more colorful than the heroes. So
Yeah.
yeah, villains often for that reason I think are very fascinating. I mean, Iago to me is a much more fascinating character than Othello. Othello's the
And
good guy,
Othello. Yeah,
but
yeah.
he's kind of hampered. He's kind of hampered by
Yeah.
that
Hmm.
altruistic morality. Where Iago has no such caveats.
Right.
He's just intent on his achieving his villainous goals. But anyhow, Steve,
Hmm.
you're right, Robert. Steve Ditko's villains are iconic in the comic book world. They're so
They
original and
absolutely
so
are.
so colorful.
Hmm. Hmm. So, Dylan, if you could just show the picture of Ditko with the think, him in his office, working in his office, and as a thinker, I love this. This is probably my favorite picture of him. He's got the artwork right in front of him, the sign of thinking, and now his ideas are evolving. He does Doctor Strange, that takes off as well. Similarly, he's not getting the credit. He's not really getting compensated for these brilliant characters. He's on the outs with Lee, and then finally, in 1966, he walks away. And again, so 1962 is Spider-Man to 66. If we think of the Beatles analogy, okay, they started in 66. By 62, they're only doing Help and like Rubber Soul. They still have Sgt. Pepper's a White Album, Let It Be, all these other things to come. And imagine if Lennon and McCartney go, well, that's exactly, Lee and Ditko split right at that time because Ditko has this idea of a hero, a non-flawed hero. And there's an audio clip that I have the link to because I wrote when Ditko died. I wrote a Objective
Yeah, I
Standard
remember. Yeah,
tribute
very,
to him.
very,
And there's
very nice eulogy. Very nice eulogy to
yeah,
Steve Ditko, Robert.
thank you. And I mean, the guy's been just such a hero in my life, but he talks about the flawed hero and how they have the muscular strength of a giant but the mentality of a 6-year-old, and the moral code of, as you said, of the sacrificial moral code. So he goes out on his own, and he's like,
Well, no,
I'm
wait,
gonna do,
hold on one second.
yeah, go ahead,
Let's discuss Doctor
sure,
Strange,
go
for at
ahead,
least
go
a
ahead,
minute,
yeah,
because
hmm
again, I mean, this is when I was a
you're
teenager
right,
reading it. This is
hmm
so original, and the
yes,
artwork was spectacular. You had Doctor Strange in
yes,
this nightmare world, and you had just monsters and the cosmos behind him. I was just like, oh my god! I mean, I was always a story guy. Literature was always my field. But
yeah,
the artwork in Doctor Strange was arresting, and it's interesting because it's 1960s. You figure this is psychedelic. It's probably a lot of college kids on mushrooms. Loving Doctor Strange,
absolutely
but it
were,
was it
yes,
was created by a guy, Big Iron Man guy, who's probably not using any drugs. You see
is
the
not,
sign there.
absolutely is not,
It says,
think,
it
yeah,
says think. It doesn't say tune in, turn on, drop out. Timothy Leary,
no,
the LSD guy's mantra. So it's a great contrast. I'm guessing Steve Ditko was a very straight kind of guy, and not a non-drug user.
yeah,
Since he was an objectivist,
there's a lot of evidence
people.
of that, yeah,
Yeah, I'm not
that's right,
surprised.
yep,
But Doctor Strange was just had this psychedelic quality to it, and it was just brilliantly colorful, beautifully done, and the character was fascinating. He was a master of the occult. He had all these magical powers.
first
I had
he's a
already
brilliant
read.
doctor. He's a
Yeah,
brilliant
he was a
doctor, and
surgeon.
then he gets into an
Right,
accident. Yeah, a surgeon gets into an
right.
accident, goes to the Far East, and finds all these higher consciousness, levels of consciousness, and changes around, and yeah,
Yeah,
again
and the,
though,
and the
a flawed.
costume. Yeah,
Oh, the costume,
the costume
yeah,
was
hmm
brilliant. Love the
yes,
it's commanding, and the very language that Doctor Strange used. He was like an aristocrat.
hmm
It was like he was
yes, yeah,
haughty a lot of times, and took
yeah,
on all these nightmare Dormammu. I remember from the old Doctor Strange comics.
yeah,
And all these
yeah,
villains who reside in the nightmare world, who want to come out into waking consciousness. And Doctor Strange is like he's like Gandalf in the in the Tolkien,
yeah.
Lord of the Rings trilogy. No,
hmm
thou shalt not pass out into the world of waking consciousness. And he was just such a commanding figure. I love Doctor Strange,
Yeah,
and everything
yeah,
about it I thought was superb. Just original.
hmm
Steve Ditko was just original. He,
yeah.
he was just an original.
Totally, totally original. Goes out on his own, and then goes to Charlton Comics. So one thing we didn't talk about is the comics code, where you couldn't have a certain amount of violence. You couldn't have. It was kind of like the movie code, rated R, rated G, and etc. And um, there was there were these movements that comics will lead into, violence in the youth, and Ditko rejected all that. He knew free will. People have free will, and um, but Charlton was more. They gave him full reign. He could do what he wanted. He didn't make a lot of money, but they were more like, "Hey, come up with your own characters." So the first one is the Question that he comes up with, and this is a more Ayn Rand type hero, an uncompromising man of justice who sees the bad guys and now doesn't let them get away with it in any sense. So we have it's in the top panel here. There are two criminals. He catches them and he throws them basically into this waterway, and they're pleading with him to save them. It's your duty basically to save us. And he's like, you don't deserve to be saved. I wouldn't do that, for anything. Basically, I'm not going to sacrifice my life to you, and lets them die. And Andy, here's the thing: if you think of movie history, any kind of arts, um, right up until this 1967, The Summer of Love, where the hero actually lets a villain die. I mean, this is uncompromising. This is not seen. It's very rare. I can't think of any incidents where they literally and you see them die. I mean, that is how radical the Question was. And we see, you asked me earlier, what is the question, he's actually asking, prompting that. And I thought, well, do you feel lucky, punk? And I think the question was a prelude to a Dirty Harry, that ruthless man of justice who is not afraid to kill the bad guy before that bad guy kills more people.
Right, right, yeah, and you're right. So many cases, where the hero has a chance to save a bad guy, a really bad guy. Talking about murderers, he'll often save the guy's life, and then he's got to go to trial. He's got to get a fair
Yeah.
trial, and get justice that way. Whereas whereas the question, you're right. No, we're not going to save you and then bring you to trial and everything. You're gonna die because of your own evil.
Mhm.
Justice will be served on you. He feels no moral duties to save the
No,
life of murderers and then bring them to trial. And
that's
so
right.
a lot of times the hero will kill the bad guy, but if the bad guy's wounded, or prior to this, if the bad guy's wounded or he's still alive and struggling, the hero will feel a moral obligation to get him to the hospital, or whatever, so save his
Yes.
life, and then, bring him to trial. Whereas the question and Mr. A, as I recall, have no such moral
Yes.
compunctions. Let the bad guy die, and let justice be done here and now, and
Yeah.
not even risk
Yeah. Like,
going to trial where he might get
right.
acquitted.
Good point, Andy. In prior cases where the hero does kill, it's always self defense. It's kind of like a shootout,
Right,
like a
right.
like it's
Like
so
in
so
Shane,
in real
like
time.
in
Exactly, like
Shane.
in
Yeah.
Shane. Yeah. Yeah, it's completely self-defense. So that's one thing. It's another thing that if Shane wounds, the guy, and just lets him to bleed to death and walk away, and tells Bobby, don't even touch him. So yeah, so we're going on, and I got to admit, uh, the Ditko Collection in the mid '80s, when I'm a complete objectivist, I hadn't thought of Spider-Man in a while, and I come across in St. Mark's Comics, the Ditko Collection, two volumes here, and
Nice.
I'm opening it up and learning about Mister A, uh, this man of justice. His card is a black and white card. Um, he just, Ayn Rand's The Cult of Moral Grayness. It's almost word for word what he's all about, and basically
Right.
the
We should we
card, the black and white here.
we should point out the name
Go
Mr.
ahead.
A, as in A is A. That's where the
A is
name
A.
comes from, right?
That's right.
Which is
That's right.
Aristotle,
Exactly.
but
Yeah.
nobody, very few people read Aristotle,
Popularized it.
philosophy.
That's right. And
Yeah,
and
it's not popular.
popularized it.
But Ayn Rand, and Atlas Shrugged, of course, popularized that, as you said, Robert. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
this is an indication of Steve Ditko's commitment to Ayn Rand's philosophy of objectivism. A is A.
That's right.
Reality is what it is. Can't be denied.
Re-
Man's nature requires him to be an honest producer, not to flourish. He has to be an honest producer, not a criminal, not a plunderer. Your criminals and
mhm.
plunderers are bad guys, and by God, or maybe
Yes.
by Mr. A,
Right.
justice
Yeah.
justice is going to be served on you.
And similarly, first episode of Mr. A criminal, a social worker saving a criminal, this woman, and Mr. A stabs him. The guy's hanging. He falls down off the roof, and he's hanging on like a flagpole. And the woman still wants to save him. She's like a bleeding. She's literally bleeding, and she's got a bleeding heart for this criminal. And Mr. A's like, no, I'm not. I'm not saving him. And she's like, you're ruthless. You're heartless. And he's like, I'm not sacrificing my life, for this kid. And the kid plunges to his death. And again, the comics code that was out, but if he could not do that for Marvel or the big comics houses, he had to do that on his own. The last 50 years of his life, Ditko kept writing, kept bringing up Mr. A, because this was his creation, his property, and a lot of his he over the course of his life, he would go back to different comic houses and
Right,
uh,
right.
create some characters. But Dylan, I want you to show the reality. So what is
Just let me jump in here for a second. Back to
Mhm.
that example. What I love about
Yeah,
Mr. A, if I could just tweak the story a little bit, make it so
sure.
let's just
Uh-huh.
imagine there's some murderer floundering in the East River, was or whatever,
Right.
and the social worker risks her life to save him, and he's got to go to trial. And everything. And Mr. A comes along and says,
Yes.
"No, pick him up and throw him back into the river. Let him drown." Let him drown here and now. Let him get the just deserts of his own evil actions. Yeah, it's ruthless.
Exactly.
And the social worker go, "You
Yeah,
are just ruthless." And Mr. A might say, "Well, justice is often harsh, ma'am or miss.
that's right. E-
Justice is often harsh. Or
exactly.
justice has to be in criminal cases like this with a known murderer. Justice is severe. Justice is ruthless."
It is. And so, what about the good? Because we know in justice, certainly in Ayn Rand's philosophy, it's more important to praise the good than to condemn the evil. So, what kind of world would we be in if Ditko created, if in his art, this is my absolute favorite work of his. You see the man walking on the bottom is reality, and then we have like the major principles of reality, facts, logic, reason, and then as you go higher, you get into the ethics and then the politics, and A is in there, and it's just this scientific, futuristic world, this clean world of reasoning where happiness, success, and all these things are possible, and the man is leaving the black part of the card and he's going into the white part down at the bottom. So that's the worldview, Ditko. That's the positive. That's what he envisioned. Man, as we say proverbially, man at his best. You know,
Yes.
yeah, there are some flaws. This is the Howard Rourke type who does in the Fountainhead, who does. He makes some mistakes, honest mistakes, but he doesn't have what Brand calls breaches of morality. He doesn't make those kinds of errors of knowledge, what we call. And so here's where Ditko is portraying, this kind of universe. This is, this benevolent, futuristic, scientific universe.
Right. Right. And I think we could wrap this up here with
Mhm.
Steve Ditko. Couple of points. You're right. Howard Rourke has these issues in the Fountainhead because he's in love with Dominique, who's tormented, and he can't have her because of
Yeah,
her torments. But he himself is not anguished. He himself has no self doubts.
that's right.
He's the ideal man. He suffers, but as he tells
Yep,
the woman he loves, it's a pain that only goes down to a certain point. His self
to a
esteem
certain point.
is
Yes.
yeah, his self esteem is unbreached. He's never questioning himself. Whereas now we come back to Steve Ditko. Peter Parker is flawed. He anguishes over all these
Hmm.
personal
Hmm.
details. Stephen Strange, was flawed. He couldn't be a surgeon anymore. He's in great in a torment over that. But Mr. A is more of an Ayn Rand type Howard
Complete.
Rourke hero. There's no self
Yes.
doubts. He's completely
Yeah.
committed to rationality and to justice. And
Hmm.
he's integrated. He'll kill the bad guys or let the bad guys die. Like I said,
Yeah.
he probably ripped the murderer out of the social worker's arms who just risked our life to save him and toss him back in the river and have no
Yeah.
inner compunctions about it because this is the morally right thing to do. To
Yeah.
let bring justice, visit justice
Yeah.
upon the bad guys. So yeah, this is
Yeah.
the
A
untroubled,
couple. Mhm.
ideal man kind of hero. He's not morally conflicted. He knows right from wrong. He acts on it, and he rewards the
That's
good,
right.
punishes the evil, and he is supremely and superbly just.
Yeah, great points, Andy. And if you read about Ditko, you hear one side of him that he's a recluse and he's got all these things that um, it's kind of like the Howard Hughes who we covered. And on the personal side, we didn't want to talk. He says my work is my life. This is right out of
Yeah,
Howard Rourke. My work done my way.
right. I got the
um,
quote here. It's great.
wanted, yeah, go
I
ahead.
got the
You read
quote.
the quote. I have a couple of other shout
Yeah, I
outs,
got
but
the
yeah,
quote
go ahead.
because
Mhm. Yeah,
because he didn't give interviews, right? like you said, he was
No,
reclusive. And
no,
yeah, here's the quote. When I do a job, it's not my personality that I'm offering the readers, but my artwork. It's not what I'm like
yeah,
that counts. It's what I did and how well it was done. I produce a product, a comic art story. Steve Ditko is the brand name, unquote. And you see
yeah,
the
yeah,
objectivist influence here. Who
yeah.
I am as a person. It's not the issue. It's my work. It's the
Yeah.
work that I offer to my readers, and it's my work that
Hmm.
that they love and that they have an interest in.
Hmm.
Not me as a person. And there's one last quote here.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the final words from Ditko's last essay. I love it. Quote: "Here's to those who wish me well, and those that don't can go to hell." Unquote.
That's a good one. Now I have to say I had a couple of shout outs. Our friends Robin Snyder and Rodney Schroeter. They
Oh
worked.
yeah.
Robin worked with him like for the past like 50 years of his life. I had two. Yeah, this is Ditko later in life. I had two encounters with him. I knew he lived in Manhattan, and I would pass by his office regularly, hoping to see him, and never happened. So one time, our friend Bosch was in New York, and Bosch had corresponded with Ditko, and I'm like, you know what? Let me call him. Let me just see if we can go by. So I call him up. Hi, Mr. Ditko. Big time fan, long time objectivist. My friend Bosch is in New York, and we'd like to see you. Oh no, I'm too busy. I'm like, oh man, I hang up. And Bosch is like, well, I'm here until Monday. Do you want to call it back? And I was like, I can't call it back. I just blew it. A couple of years later, I'm working at New York Objectivist Club, and Ditko makes a donation. Okay. And I'm like, oh, here's my chance to call him again and say thank you. I call him, Mr. Ditko, I just want to say thank you for this contribution. He goes, if I would have known you were going to call me, I wouldn't give you any money. Hangs up the phone again. So I get
Oh my
two.
God.
I get trashed by my hero twice. you know, that's them. My brother Damien, the same one who had the Marvel comics. Damien has no shame. He's like, where does he work? Finds 51st and 7th Avenue. Damon goes to his office, knocks on the door. Ditko lets him in, hands him a couple of issues of Mr. A, and they're chatting. Damon's not an objectivist. It's like he doesn't know the philosophy the way I do. And but he had no shame, and he walks out. He was like, he said he spoke for like 15 minutes, didn't even sit down. But totally cordial, perfect gentleman, and all the stuff, all the stuff that
That's great.
you know
That's,
you'd want from that kind of guy.
that's great.
So my last
Great,
thing,
great stuff.
my
Yeah,
last yeah,
great
my last
stories.
thing is on Halloween. I dress up now as Spider-Man, and I go into the park here. We have a beautiful park, and bring candy for kid. All the kids come up to me and they want to take pictures. I mean, that's like Spider-Man's. He's never going away. Like this is one of the things. I wish Mr. A had the popularity of a
Yeah,
Spider-Man, but he doesn't. And we take what we can in the
right.
culture.
And we do the hero show when we promote Mr. A, and hopefully more people are interested in
Yes.
that aspect of Steve
Yeah.
Ditko's work. And I see, as a and so to wrap this up, we could salute the great Steve Ditko, with his
Thank you.
words.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. And here's to those who wish me well, and those who don't can go to hell. Those are the words to live by.
Great job there. Yeah, absolutely, Andy.
So I
Thank you.
think
We'll
we
see
did
you
the
next
great
time.
man justice. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you to
Hmm.
Steve Ditko. Great stories, Robert. And, we'll
Hmm.
be back next week once again on the Hero Show. So I want to wish everybody, let's try to, lead more heroic lives, have a more
Yes.
heroic day. I will see you next week once again on the Hero Show. Take care, everybody.